The dust from the stagecoach was still settling when Lucy stepped down onto the wooden platform. Her brown dress was wrinkled from 3 days of travel, and her small bag held everything she owned in the world. The frontier town of Cedar Creek looked rough around the edges, just like she felt inside. Lucy had never been this far from home before. Back in Missouri, she had lived with her father on their small farm until fever took him last winter. Without family or money, she had sold everything just to buy a ticket west. People said there were opportunities out here for folks willing to work hard. The sun was getting hot as Lucy walked down the main street. She passed the general store, the saloon, and the church before she saw the sign she was looking for. Ranch. Hands wanted. Sunset Valley Ranch. Her heart jumped a little. This could be her chance. Following the directions the storekeeper gave her, Lucy walked 2 miles out of town. The Sunset Valley Ranch spread out before her like something from a dream. Rolling green pastures stretched as far as she could see, dotted with cattle. A big wooden house sat on a hill, and several barns and corrals filled the valley below. Near the main corral, a tall man was working with a wild horse. His dark hair was messy under his hat, and his shirt sleeves were rolled up, showing strong arms. Lucy could tell right away this wasn't just any ranch hand. The way he moved and the way the other workers looked to him told her this was the boss. Lucy took a deep breath and walked closer. The man looked up when he heard her footsteps. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, and for a moment Lucy forgot what she had planned to say. "Can I help you, miss?" he asked, tying off the horse's rope. "I'm looking for work," Lucy said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "I saw your sign in town. I can cook, clean, help with the books, and I know my way around horses and cattle." The man studied her for a long moment. Lucy could feel her cheeks getting red under his gaze, but she kept her chin up. She had learned early that showing weakness got you nowhere. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lucy Bennett. I'm Ben Cartwright. This is my ranch." He pushed his hat back on his head. "Tell me, Miss Bennett, what makes you think you can handle ranch work? This isn't easy living out here." Lucy straightened her shoulders. "My father raised cattle back in Missouri. I've been working with animals since I could walk. I can ride, rope, and I'm not afraid of hard work. I lost everything when my father died, but I didn't lose what he taught me." Ben's expression softened just a little. "I'm sorry for your loss, but I have to ask, why come all the way out here? Surely there was work closer to home." "Sometimes you have to go where the opportunities are," Lucy said simply. "I heard the West was a place where people could make a fresh start if they were willing to work for it." Ben nodded slowly. He glanced toward the house on the hill, then back at Lucy. Something seemed to be working in his mind. The other ranch hands had stopped their work to watch, sensing something important was happening. "Miss Bennett," Ben said, "finally, I do need help around here. More than you might know. But I have to be honest with you. I can't pay much in wages. Money's been tight since my partner left last year." Lucy felt her heart sink. She had hoped for steady pay to help her get back on her feet. "But," Ben continued, and something in his voice made Lucy look up sharply, "I might have another proposition. For you, one that would solve both our problems." "What kind of proposition?" Lucy asked carefully. Ben took off his hat and ran his hand through his hair. When he looked at her again, there was something almost shy in his expression, which seemed strange for such a strong man. "Marry me by sunset tonight, and the job is yours. Full partnership in the ranch. You'd have a home, security, and meaningful work." Lucy's mouth fell open. She stared at him, certain she had misheard. "Marry you?" she whispered. "I know it sounds crazy," Ben said quickly. "But hear me out. I need someone I can trust to help run this place, someone with your skills and determination. And you need security and a place to belong. It would be a business arrangement, nothing more. Separate rooms, no expectations beyond working together to make this ranch succeed." Lucy's mind was spinning. She had come looking for a job and ended up with a marriage proposal from a complete stranger. It was the most ridiculous thing she had ever heard, but as she looked around at the beautiful ranch, at the cattle grazing peacefully in the fields, at the solid house on the hill, she couldn't help but think about her alternatives. She had less than $5 to her name. Winter would come eventually, and she had nowhere to go. "Why would you make such an offer to someone you just met?" she asked. Ben was quiet for a moment. "Because in the 5 minutes we've been talking, you've shown more backbone and practical sense than most people I've known for years, and because I'm desperate enough to take a chance on someone who might be desperate enough to take a chance on me." Lucy looked at the sun, which was already past its highest point. Sunset was maybe 6 hours away. 6 hours to decide whether to trust this stranger with her entire future. "I need time to think," she said. "Of course," Ben nodded. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here when you decide." As Lucy walked back toward town, her mind raced with possibilities and fears. Behind her, Ben watched until she disappeared around the bend, wondering if he had just made the biggest mistake of his life, or if he had somehow found exactly what he had been looking for without even knowing he was searching. Lucy walked slowly back to town, her mind churning like butter in a churn. The marriage proposal echoed in her ears with every step. She had expected to ask for work mucking stalls or washing dishes, not to receive an offer that would change her entire life. The first person she met was Mrs. Patterson, the storekeeper's wife, who was sweeping the front porch of the general store. The older woman looked up with kind eyes as Lucy approached. "You look like you've seen a ghost, dear," Mrs. Patterson said, setting down her broom. "Come sit a spell and tell me what's troubling you." Lucy found herself sitting on the wooden steps, grateful for a friendly face. "I went out to the Sunset Valley Ranch looking for work," she said carefully. You met Ben Cartwright then," Mrs. Patterson nodded knowingly. "Good man, that one. Been running that ranch by himself since his brother died in that riding accident 2 years back. Works himself near to death trying to keep everything going." "His brother died?" Lucy asked, pieces starting to fit together. "Poor boy. Ben and his brother Daniel built that ranch together from nothing. When Daniel passed, Ben lost more than family. He lost his best friend and business partner. Been struggling ever since, but too proud to ask for help." Mrs. Patterson studied Lucy's face. "What kind of work did he offer you?" Lucy hesitated. She couldn't very well announce that Ben had proposed marriage to a complete stranger. "He said he needed help with the ranch operations. Someone who understands cattle and can handle the business side too." "That sounds about right. Ben's got a good head for ranching, but the paperwork and planning side of things ... Well, that was more Daniel's strength." Mrs. Patterson leaned closer. "Between you and me, dear, I think Ben's been lonely out there. Man wasn't meant to live alone, especially not one who used to have such close family." As the afternoon wore on, Lucy learned more about Ben from various townspeople. The blacksmith told her how Ben always paid his bills on time, even when money was tight. The doctor mentioned how Ben had helped several neighbors during the harsh winter, sharing his hay and grain when others had run short. "Never asked for anything in return," the doctor said. "Just the kind of man who sees something that needs doing and does it." At the church, Lucy met Reverend Williams, a gentle man with white hair and laugh lines around his eyes. When she mentioned she had visited the Sunset Valley Ranch, his face lit up. "Ben Cartwright is one of the finest men I know," the Reverend said. "Lost his way a bit after his brother died. Grief can do that to a person, but his heart is solid gold." "Are you thinking of working for him?" "I'm considering it," Lucy said quietly. "Well, if you're looking for honest work with honest pay, you couldn't do better. Though I worry about that boy out there all alone. Been praying he'd find someone to share the load with him." As the sun began to sink lower in the sky, Lucy found herself at the edge of town, looking back toward the ranch. In the distance, she could see smoke rising from the chimney of the big house. The sight made something tighten in her chest, not fear, but something that felt almost like homesickness for a place she had never lived. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, Ben was having his own doubts. He stood on the porch of the main house, watching the road to town and wondering what had possessed him to make such a wild proposal. His foreman, old Pete, came up from the barn and joined him. "You're wearing a hole in them boards with all that pacing," Pete observed. "Something eating at you, boss?" Ben had known Pete for 10 years. The older man had been Daniel's friend first, then had stayed on after the accident out of loyalty. If anyone could give him straight advice, it was Pete. "I did something crazy today, Pete. Asked that woman from town to marry me." Pete raised his eyebrows but didn't look shocked. "The one who came looking for work?" "She seemed like she had good sense about her. What did she say?" "She asked for time." "To think." Ben ran his hand through his hair. "I don't know what got into me. Maybe I've been alone out here too long." "Maybe you have," Pete agreed. "Or maybe you finally got smart enough to recognize quality when you see it. That gal handled your stallion better than most men I know. And she looked you straight in the eye when she talked, no shy nonsense or batting eyelashes." Ben nodded. That had impressed him too. Lucy had been direct and honest, qualities that were rarer than gold in his experience. "You think I'm crazy for making such an offer to a stranger?" Ben asked. Pete was quiet for a long moment, looking out over the ranch they had all worked so hard to build. "I think you're lonely, and I think this place needs a woman's touch. Been falling apart around the edges since Daniel died, and we both know it. Not the buildings, those are solid. But a ranch is more than buildings and cattle. It's supposed to be a home." As the sun touched the horizon, Ben saw a figure walking up the long road to the ranch. Even from a distance, he could tell it was Lucy by the determined way she carried herself. His heart started beating faster, and he realized he was holding his breath. Lucy walked steadily toward the house, her decision made. She had thought about her alternatives, considered the risks, and weighed what she knew about Ben Cartwright against what she faced alone. The truth was simple. She trusted him more after one conversation than she had trusted anyone in a long time. When she reached the porch, Ben was waiting. In the golden light of sunset, he looked different somehow, more uncertain, more human. It gave Lucy courage. "I've made my decision," she said simply. Ben nodded, not trusting his voice. "I'll marry you, Ben Cartwright, but I have conditions. Name them." "This is a business partnership. I'd pull my weight, and I get treated as an equal partner in decisions about the ranch. I keep my own room, and neither of us expects anything beyond working together to make this place successful." "Agreed," Ben said immediately. "And if either of us wants out of the arrangement after a year, we discuss it honestly, no hard feelings." Ben extended his hand to shake on it, the same way he would seal any business deal. When Lucy's small hand met his calloused one, something passed between them that neither quite understood. "Then I guess we better go find Reverend Williams," Ben said. "We've got a wedding to arrange before the sun sets completely." As they walked toward town together, both wondered what they had just committed themselves to. Behind them, the ranch. House windows glowed warm in the gathering dusk, waiting for them to return and begin their new life together. The wedding took place just as the last light was fading from the sky. Reverend Williams seemed surprised but pleased when Ben and Lucy appeared at his door asking to be married immediately. His wife, Martha, insisted on being a witness and quickly picked some wildflowers from her garden for Lucy to hold. "Are you sure about this, dear?" Martha whispered to Lucy while the men talked quietly in the front of the small church. "Marriage is a big step even when you've known someone for years." Lucy looked at Ben, who was standing stiffly in his best shirt and clean pants. He looked nervous but determined, and something about that combination made her feel calmer about her own decision. "I'm sure," she said quietly. "Sometimes you have to take a leap of faith." The ceremony was simple. Ben's voice was steady when he said his vows, and Lucy's hands only shook a little when they exchanged the plain gold rings that Reverend Williams kept for emergencies like this. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Ben looked at Lucy uncertainly for a moment before giving her a gentle kiss on the forehead. "Well, Mrs. Cartwright," he said softly, and Lucy felt a strange flutter in her stomach at hearing her new name. The ride back to the ranch in Ben's wagon was quiet. Both of them seemed to realize that the easy part was over, and now they had to figure out how to actually live together. The ranch house looked bigger and more intimidating in the darkness, lit only by the oil lamps Ben had left burning in the windows. "I'll show you to your room," Ben said once they were inside. He led her up the wooden stairs to a clean, simple bedroom with a window overlooking the valley. It was going to be a guest room, but I never got around to finishing it. There are quilts in the chest if you get cold. Thank you, Lucy said. It's perfect. Ben hesitated in the doorway. Lucy, I want you to know what I said earlier about this being a business arrangement. I meant it. You don't have to worry about me expecting anything else from you. Something in his voice made Lucy look at him more closely. She realized he was as nervous about this as she was, maybe more so. I know, she said. Good night, Ben. Good night. Wife. The next morning, Lucy woke before dawn to the sound of someone moving around downstairs. She dressed quickly and found Ben in the kitchen, making coffee over the wood stove. He looked up when she came in, and for a moment they both seemed startled to remember they were married. Morning, Ben said. Coffee should be ready soon. I usually eat breakfast with the hands down at the bunkhouse. Would it be all right if I joined you? Lucy asked. I'd like to meet the crew and see how things work around here. Ben nodded, looking relieved that she wanted to be involved. That would be good. They'll want to meet you too. At the bunkhouse, Lucy met the 5 men who worked the ranch. Besides old Pete, there was young Tommy, barely 18 and eager to prove himself. Carlos was a quiet man who had worked cattle all his life and could rope better than anyone. Jim and Bill were brothers who had come west together and specialized in breaking horses. The men were polite but clearly curious about the sudden marriage. Lucy could see questions in their eyes, but they were too respectful to ask directly. She decided to address it head-on. I know this seems sudden, she said as they sat around the rough wooden table eating eggs and biscuits. Ben needed help running the ranch, and I needed work and a place to belong. We figured we could help each other. Old Pete nodded approvingly. Makes sense to me. Been telling Ben for months he needed a partner. What kind of experience do you have with cattle, ma'am? Carlos asked quietly. For the next hour, Lucy found herself answering questions about her background and sharing stories from her father's ranch. She could see the men relaxing as they realized she actually knew what she was talking about. When she mentioned some ideas for improving the winter feeding setup, even Ben started taking notes. You think that would work better than what we're doing now? He asked. It worked well for my father. The cattle stayed healthier, and we used less hay overall? Lucy hesitated, then plunged ahead. I noticed yesterday that your books are kept in the house office. Would it be all right if I looked them over? I might be able to help with the business side of things. Ben and Pete exchanged glances. The books are, well, they're not in great shape, Ben admitted. Daniel always handled that part, and I've been muddling through since he died. If you can make sense of them, you're welcome to try. After breakfast, Ben showed Lucy around the ranch properly. She could see immediately that it was a well-run operation, but there were signs of strain everywhere. Fences that needed mending, equipment that could use repair, and a general air of making do with less than ideal. In the house office, Lucy found ledgers that confirmed what she had suspected. The ranch was profitable, but barely. Too much money was going out for supplies that could be bought cheaper elsewhere, and not enough attention was being paid to maximizing the return on cattle sales. Ben? She called from the office that afternoon. When he appeared in the doorway, she gestured to the books spread across the desk. How much do you know about commodity prices in the eastern markets? Not much, he admitted. We've always sold to the same buyers Daniel set up deals with. I think we might be able to do better, a lot better. Lucy showed him figures she had been calculating. If we time our sales differently and maybe ship to different markets, we could increase our profit by 20%, maybe more. Ben stared at the numbers. Are you sure about this? Pretty sure. My father taught me to always know what your product is worth before you sell it. I think you've been selling yourselves short. That evening, as they ate dinner together in the big kitchen, Ben found himself watching Lucy with growing respect. She had thrown herself into learning about the ranch with enthusiasm that reminded him of himself and Daniel when they were first starting out. Can I ask you something? He said as Lucy served apple pie she had somehow found time to bake. Of course. Why didn't you try to negotiate for wages along with the marriage proposal? You could have asked for both. Lucy considered the question while she cut her pie. Because partners don't get paid wages. They get a share of the profits. If, I can help make this ranch more successful, we both benefit. If I had just taken a job, I would always be working for someone else instead of working for myself. Ben nodded slowly. You thought this through pretty carefully. I had to. It's my future too now. Lucy met his eyes across the table. I hope I can live up to your expectations. I think, Ben said quietly, that my expectations might have been too small. As Lucy cleaned up the kitchen and Ben went to check on the animals one last time, both of them were beginning to realize that their business arrangement might be more complicated than either had planned. They were already starting to work together, like a team, and that felt surprisingly natural, but they were also living in the same house, sharing meals and learning each other's habits in ways that felt much more personal than purely business. When Lucy said goodnight and headed upstairs to her room, Ben found himself listening to her footsteps above his head and wondering what it would be like. If this marriage was real in every way, the thought scared him almost as much as it intrigued him. 3 weeks into their marriage, Lucy discovered just how serious the ranch's financial problems really were. She had been working through old papers in the office when she found a stack of bills that Ben had tucked away in a drawer. Her heart sank as she read through them. Ben, she called, her voice tight with concern. When he appeared, she held up the papers. Why didn't you tell me about these? Ben's face went red as he saw what she had found. I didn't want to worry you. I thought I could figure something out before ... Before what? Before we lost the ranch. Lucy spread the bills across the desk. This is serious money, Ben. The bank payment alone is more than we make in 3 months. Ben sank into the chair across from her, suddenly looking older than his 32 years. I know. I've been trying to find a way to make it work, but every time I think I have a plan, something else goes wrong. Last month it was veterinary bills when half the herd got sick. The month before that, the roof on the main barn needed fixing. Lucy studied the numbers again, her mind working. How long do we have before the bank expects payment? 2 months. Maybe 3 if I can convince them to extend the loan again. Ben ran his hands through his hair. Lucy, I should have told you all this before we got married. You had a right to know what you were getting into. Yes, I did, Lucy agreed, but her voice was gentle rather than angry. But I'm here now, and we're in this together. That's what partners do. They solve problems together. Over the next few days, Lucy threw herself into understanding every aspect of the ranch's finances. She rode out with Ben to look at the cattle, walked the fence lines to assess what repairs were most urgent, and spent hours going over contracts and bills. I think I know part of the problem, she announced at dinner one evening. You're paying too much for feed, and you're not getting enough for your cattle when you sell them. What do you mean? Lucy pulled out a notebook where she had been making calculations. The feed supplier in town is charging you almost double what you could get the same grain for if you bought direct from farmers 2 counties over. And the cattle buyers you're working with, I think they're taking advantage of you, Ben frowned. Those are the same suppliers and buyers Daniel worked with for years. Maybe Daniel was better at negotiating than you think, or maybe they've been slowly raising prices since he died, figuring you wouldn't notice. Lucy leaned forward. Ben, I think some people in town know you're struggling, and they're not all as honest as they should be. The next day, Ben and Lucy rode into town together to talk to the feed supplier. Lucy watched as the man quoted Ben a price that was significantly higher than what she had learned other ranchers were paying. That seems expensive, Lucy said pleasantly. Are you sure that's the best price you can offer for a good customer? The supplier looked uncomfortable. Well, times are hard, ma'am. Prices have gone up all over. Of course, Lucy nodded. We understand. We'll just have to look elsewhere for our feed needs. Thank you for your time. As they walked away, Ben stared at Lucy in amazement. He was cheating me, wasn't he? I think so. And I think he's been doing it for a while. Lucy took Ben's arm. The question is, who else has been taking advantage of you? Over the following week, they discovered the answer was more people than Ben had realized. The banker had been charging higher interest rates than the standard. The cattle buyer had been consistently offering prices below market value. Even the blacksmith had been overcharging for horseshoes and repairs. "I can't believe I was so blind," Ben said one evening as they reviewed their findings. "You weren't blind, you were grieving," Lucy said firmly. "And you trusted people you thought were friends. That's not a weakness, Ben, but now we know better, and we can fix this." Lucy's business sense proved to be even sharper than Ben had hoped. She renegotiated contracts, found new suppliers, and established relationships with cattle buyers in distant cities who offered better prices. Within a month, she had cut the ranch's expenses by nearly 30% and increased their income. Potential by even more, but the financial improvements weren't the only changes happening at the ranch. Ben found himself looking forward to their evening conversations about business, and then finding excuses to keep talking long after the ranch work was discussed. Lucy had a way of seeing solutions to problems that had seemed impossible to him. "How do you do it?" he asked one night as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "You've been here a month and you've accomplished more than I managed in 2 years?" Lucy was quiet for a moment. "I had a good teacher. My father used to say that every problem has at least 3 solutions. You just have to be willing to look for them. And I have an advantage you don't." "What's that?" "I'm not carrying the weight of grief and guilt that you are." Lucy turned to look at him. "Ben, you've been trying to run this ranch the way Daniel would have, instead of the way Ben Cartwright would. That's not fair to you or to the ranch." Ben felt something tight in his chest loosen a little. "I keep thinking I should have been able to save him. If I had been a better rider, or if I had insisted on going with him that day, Accidents happen," Lucy said softly. "They're not anyone's fault. But you've been punishing yourself by trying to be someone you're not. You're a good rancher, Ben. You just need to trust yourself." That night, as Ben lay in his bed listening to Lucy moving around in the room next to his, he realized something had changed between them. What had started as a business arrangement was becoming something deeper, at least on his side. He found himself noticing the way Lucy's eyes lit up when she solved a problem, or how she hummed while she cooked breakfast, or the way she always made sure everyone felt included in conversations. He was falling in love with his wife, and he had no idea if she felt anything for him beyond partnership and friendship. Meanwhile, in her own room, Lucy was having similar thoughts. She had expected to work alongside Ben and gradually build a comfortable business relationship. What she hadn't expected was how much she enjoyed his company, or how safe she felt when he was around, or how her heart jumped a little when he smiled. At her across the dinner table she had married Ben Cartwright for security and opportunity. But somewhere along the way, she had started to care about him as a man, not just as a business partner. The realization both thrilled and terrified her. Neither of them was ready to admit these feelings, but both were beginning to understand that their arrangement had become much more complicated than either had planned. The storm hit without warning on a Tuesday morning in late October. Lucy woke to the sound of wind howling around the house and rain pounding against her bedroom window. When she looked outside, she could barely see the barn through the sheets of water falling from the dark sky downstairs. Ben was already dressed and pulling on his heavy coat. "It's bad," he said when he saw her. "Pete rode up from the bunkhouse 20 minutes ago. Half the cattle are missing from the south pasture. The fence must have blown down in the wind." Lucy grabbed her own coat and hat. "What can I do?" "Stay here where it's safe," Ben said automatically, then caught himself when he saw Lucy's expression. "I mean, this is dangerous work in weather like this. Ben Cartwright, I didn't marry you to sit in the kitchen while you risk your life." Alone, Lucy was already pulling on her boots. "Those cattle represent our future too. I'm coming with you." They rode out into the storm with Pete and the other ranch hands, the wind so strong it nearly knocked them from their horses. The rain was cold and driving, soaking through their clothes within minutes. But Lucy kept pace with the men, her face determined despite the miserable conditions in the south pasture. They found the fence completely flattened and nearly 200 head of cattle scattered across the hills. Some had wandered toward the river, which was rising fast from all the rain. If they didn't get the animals back to safety soon, they could lose them to the floodwaters. "We need to split up," Ben shouted over the wind. "Pete, take Tommy and Jim toward the river. Carlos and Bill, check the North Ridge. Lucy and I will—" "I'll go with Pete's group," Lucy called back. "The river's the most dangerous area. You need your most experienced people there." Ben started to argue, then realized she was right. Pete had been working cattle longer than anyone, and if the situation near the river was as bad as he feared, Lucy's quick thinking could be valuable. For the next 4 hours, they worked in teams to round up the scattered cattle. Lucy proved herself repeatedly, using her horse to cut off strays and helping guide frightened animals back toward the safety of the ranch. When a calf got separated from its mother and wandered too close to the swollen river, it was Lucy who risked riding into the dangerous current to rope it to safety. "That was some fine work," Pete told her as they finally got the last of the cattle secured in the barn. "I've seen men with 20 years' experience who couldn't have handled that calf rescue better." Lucy was soaked to the skin and exhausted, but she felt a deep satisfaction at having helped save the herd. More than that, she had seen the way Ben looked at her throughout the day, with respect, admiration, and something else that made her heart beat faster. That evening, after they had all dried off and eaten a hot meal, Ben found Lucy sitting by the fire in the main room of the house. She had changed into a simple dress, and her hair was loose around her shoulders instead of pinned up as usual. The firelight made it shine like copper. "Thank you," he said, settling into the chair beside her. "For today, you probably saved us from losing half the herd." "We're partners," Lucy said simply. "That's what partners do." Ben was quiet for a moment, staring into the fire. "Lucy, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you ever regret it?" "Marrying me, Coming out here instead of finding some other way to make a life for yourself?" Lucy turned to look at him, surprised by the vulnerability in his voice. "Why would you ask that?" "Because you could have done anything. You're smart enough to have found work in a city, maybe even started your own business. Instead, you're stuck out here on a struggling ranch with a man you barely know." Lucy was quiet for a long moment, considering her answer carefully. The truth was more complicated than Ben realized. "Ben, when I came here, I was running from the life I had lost. I thought I just needed a job and a place to stay until I could figure out what to do next." She paused, trying to find the right words. "But this ranch... It doesn't feel like a place I'm stuck. It feels like a place I belong." Ben looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "And what about me? Do I feel like someone you're stuck with?" Lucy's heart started beating faster. There was something in his voice that suggested this wasn't just a casual question. "No," she said softly. "You don't feel like someone I'm stuck with." "What do I feel like?" Lucy felt her cheeks getting warm. This conversation was moving into territory they had both been carefully avoiding for weeks. "You feel like—" She hesitated, then decided to be honest. "You feel like someone I care about, more than I expected to." Ben leaned forward in his chair. "Lucy, I need to tell you something. This arrangement we made, it's not working for me anymore." Lucy's heart sank. "You want me to leave?" "No," Ben said quickly. "That's not what I mean at all. I mean, it's not working because I don't want it to be just business anymore. Somewhere along the way, I started caring about you as more than just a partner." Lucy stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "I know that's not what we agreed to," Ben continued. "And I don't want to pressure you or make you uncomfortable. But I couldn't keep pretending that what I feel for you is just partnership and friendship." Lucy felt relief and joy flooding through her. "Ben, You don't have to say anything," he said quickly. "I just needed you to." "No, nothing has to change between us if you don't want it to." "But I do want it to change," Lucy said, her voice barely above a whisper, then went very still. "What do you mean?" Lucy took a deep breath and decided to take the biggest risk of her life. "I mean, I care about you too. More than I should, probably. More than I planned to. For a moment, they just looked at each other across the small space between their chairs. Then Ben slowly reached out and took her hand. So what do we do now? He asked. Lucy smiled, feeling lighter than she had in months. I think we stop pretending this is just a business arrangement and see what happens when we're honest about what we want. Ben brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. What I want is to court my own wife properly. To take the time to show you how much you mean to me. I'd like that, Lucy said. Outside, the storm was finally beginning to calm. But inside the house, something new and wonderful was just beginning to grow. The weeks following the storm were some of the happiest Lucy had ever known. Ben kept his word about courting her properly, bringing her wildflowers from the meadow, taking her on rides to show her the most beautiful parts of the ranch, and finding excuses to spend time together beyond their daily work. Lucy found herself falling deeper in love with her husband every day. She loved watching him work with the horses, gentle but firm. She loved the way he listened carefully to her ideas and treated her opinions with respect. Most of all, she loved the way he looked at her now, like she was precious to him. The ranch was thriving under their partnership. The changes Lucy had implemented were showing real results, and for the first time since Daniel's death, Ben felt optimistic about the future. They were even starting to talk about improvements they wanted to make, maybe adding more cattle in the spring, or building a better barn. But their happiness was threatened when a stranger arrived in Cedar Creek asking questions about Lucy. Mrs. Patterson was the first to mention it. Curious fellow came by the store yesterday, she told Lucy when she came to town for supplies. Well-dressed man from back east. Said he was looking for a woman who matched your description. Asked if anyone named Lucy Bennett had passed through town recently. Lucy felt her blood turn cold. What did you tell him? Told him I didn't know anyone by that name, Mrs. Patterson said firmly. Didn't like the feel of him, if you want the truth. Something about his eyes. Too calculating, if you know what I mean, Lucy nodded, her mind racing. There was only one person from her past who might be looking for her, and if Robert Hammond had found her, it meant serious trouble. That evening, Lucy was quieter than usual during dinner. Ben noticed immediately. Something's bothering you, he said as she picked at her food. What is it? Lucy hesitated. She and Ben had been growing closer every day, but she had never told him the complete truth about why she had left Missouri. She had let him believe her father had simply died of fever, leaving her with no choice but to seek her fortune elsewhere. Mrs. Patterson mentioned that someone was asking questions about me in town, she said carefully. Ben set down his fork. What kind of questions? Looking for someone named Lucy Bennett, a man from back east. Do you know who it might be? Lucy took a deep breath. It was time to tell Ben the whole truth, even if it meant risking the happiness they had found together. Ben, I haven't been completely honest with you about my past. My father didn't just die of fever. Before he got sick, he lost our ranch to a man named Robert Hammond. Ben listened as Lucy told him the real story. Her father had been a successful rancher, until Hammond had approached him with what seemed like a generous business partnership. Hammond had convinced her father to put up the ranch as collateral for a joint venture that was supposed to make them both rich. But it was all lies, Lucy said, her voice bitter with old pain. Hammond had set up fake companies and false contracts. By the time my father realized what was happening, Hammond owned everything legally. The court said there was nothing we could do. My God, Lucy, why didn't you tell me this before? Because I was afraid, Lucy admitted. Afraid you'd think I brought trouble with me. Afraid Hammond might somehow cause problems for the ranch if he found me. Ben reached across the table and took her hands. You should have trusted me with this. I know, I'm sorry. Lucy looked into his eyes. Then, if that man in town is Hammond, he's not here by accident. He must want something from me, and Hammond always gets what he wants, no matter who gets hurt. The next morning, their fears were confirmed when Hammond himself rode up to the ranch. Lucy watched from the window as a well-dressed man on an expensive horse approached the house. Even from a distance, she recognized his cold, calculating manner. Stay inside, Ben told her, but Lucy shook her head. No, if he's here about me, I need to face him, but Ben, please be careful. Hammond is dangerous in ways that aren't always obvious. Robert Hammond was a man in his 50s with silver hair and expensive clothes that looked out of place on a working ranch. His smile was pleasant, but his eyes were hard as stones. "Mr. Cartwright, I presume?" he said pleasantly as Ben and Lucy came out onto the porch. "I'm Robert Hammond. I believe you have something that belongs to me." "I don't think we've ever met," Ben said evenly. "What exactly do you think I have of yours?" Hammond's gaze fixed on Lucy. "Why, my runaway daughter-in-law, of course." "Hello, Lucy dear, you've led me quite a chase." Lucy felt sick. "I was never married to your son, and you know it." "Ah, but you were engaged to him." "Legally engaged, with contracts signed by your dear departed father. When you disappeared after his death, you broke those contracts. That makes you liable for damages." Ben stepped forward slightly, positioning himself between Hammond and Lucy. "I think you're mistaken, Mr. Hammond. This is my wife, Lucy Cartwright. We were married right here in Cedar Creek." Hammond's smile grew wider and more unpleasant. "How fascinating! And when did this marriage take place?" 2 months ago, Ben said firmly. "Well, then, you've married a woman who was already legally committed to another man. That makes your marriage invalid, I'm afraid. Lucy will need to come with me to fulfill her original obligations." "That's ridiculous," Lucy said, finding her voice. "Your son never wanted to marry me any more than I wanted to marry him. The engagement was just another one of your business schemes. Nevertheless, contracts were signed, money changed hands. You owe me compensation for the embarrassment and financial loss your disappearance caused my family." Ben's voice was dangerously quiet when he spoke. "How much compensation?" Hammond pretended to consider. "Well, there's the matter of the dowry your father-in-law promised. The wedding expenses that were already incurred, the damage to my son's reputation. I'd say $50,000 would cover it," Lucy gasped. It was an enormous sum, far more than the ranch could possibly afford. "Of course," Hammond continued smoothly, "if Lucy comes with me willingly to honor her original commitment, we could forget about the money entirely." "Over my dead body," Ben said flatly. Hammond's pleasant mask slipped slightly. "Mr. Cartwright, you seem like a reasonable man. Surely you can see that I'm being more than fair. Lucy belongs with my family, fulfilling the obligations her father agreed to. This little ranch adventure of yours is charming, but it's time for her to face reality." "The reality is that Lucy is my wife, and she's staying here," Ben said. "Now I suggest you leave our property before I have you removed." Hammond's eyes glittered with malice. "I think you'll find that's not going to be so easy, Mr. Cartwright. I've done my research on this little ranch of yours. You're barely keeping your head above water financially. It would be a shame if your creditors suddenly decided to call in their loans all at once." The threat was clear. Hammond had the money and connections to ruin them financially if they didn't give him what he wanted. "Take some time to think about it," Hammond said, mounting his horse. "I'll be staying at the hotel in town for a few days, but don't take too long to decide, Lucy. The longer this drags out, the more expensive it becomes for everyone." As Hammond rode away, Lucy sank into one of the porch chairs, her face pale. "He can do it, Ben," she said quietly. "He can destroy the ranch just like he destroyed my father. I should go with him." "Like hell you will," Ben said fiercely, kneeling beside her chair. "Lucy, look at me. We're not going to let him win. There has to be a way to fight this." "How? He has money, lawyers, connections. All we have is each other," Ben finished. "And sometimes that's enough. We just have to be smarter than he is." Lucy looked into Ben's determined eyes and felt a spark of hope. Maybe Hammond wasn't as invincible as he seemed. Maybe there was a way to beat him at his own game. But first, they had to figure out what that game really was. That night, Ben and Lucy sat at the kitchen table with every paper Lucy could remember about her father's dealings with Hammond. By lamplight, they went through contracts, letters, and legal documents that Lucy had salvaged before leaving Missouri. "Look at this," Lucy said, pointing to a clause in one of the contracts. Hammond's company was supposed to provide cattle for the joint venture. But according to this receipt, the cattle were never delivered. Ben studied the papers more closely. And here, this says your father paid Hammond $15,000 up front for equipment that, according to this inventory list, was never received either. My father mentioned that toward the end, Lucy said quietly. He kept asking Hammond when the cattle and equipment would arrive, and Hammond kept making excuses. As they continued reading, a pattern emerged. Hammond had consistently failed to meet his obligations under the contracts while demanding that Lucy's father fulfill every one of his commitments. Lucy, I think your father was swindled, but not in the way you thought, Ben said slowly. Look at all this evidence. Hammond broke the contracts first, multiple times. That should make all of them invalid. But the courts in Missouri ruled against my father. Courts that Hammond probably had influence with, Ben pointed out. But we're not in Missouri anymore, and I have an idea. The next morning, Ben rode into town alone while Lucy stayed at the ranch with Pete and the other hands for protection. Ben's first stop was the telegraph office, where he sent messages to lawyers in Denver and San Francisco, asking for advice about contract law and fraud cases. His next stop was Reverend Williams, who listened carefully as Ben explained the situation. I've heard of men like this, Hammond, the Reverend said grimly. They prey on honest folks who trust their word. But sometimes the Lord provides a way to turn the tables on such people. What do you mean? I mean, I may know someone who can help you. My brother-in-law is a federal marshal based in Denver. If this Hammond fellow has been running similar schemes across state lines, it becomes a federal matter. Ben felt a surge of hope. Would your brother-in-law be willing to look into it? I'll send a telegram immediately. In the meantime, you and Lucy need to be very careful. Men like Hammond don't like being challenged, and they can be dangerous when cornered. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, Lucy was having her own revelation. While organizing papers in the office, she found something that made her heart race. A letter from a lawyer in Kansas City that had arrived for Ben just before their marriage. The letter was about a man named Robert Hammond who was being investigated for fraud in connection with several failed business ventures. The lawyer was seeking information from anyone who had dealings with Hammond or his companies. Lucy raced to the barn where Pete was working. Pete, I need to get to town immediately. It's urgent. Pete took one look at her face and started saddling a horse without questions. In town, Lucy found Ben at the sheriff's office, where he was explaining the situation to Sheriff Johnson. Ben. Lucy burst in, waving the letter. Look what I found. Ben. Read the letter quickly, his expression growing more hopeful with every line. This changes everything, he said. Lucy, this means Hammond is already under investigation. Other people have come forward with similar stories to yours. Sheriff Johnson studied the letter. If this is the same Robert Hammond who's been staying at our hotel, then we might be able to help you folks more than you know. Federal marshals don't investigate small-time crooks. This man must be running a significant operation. They were interrupted by a commotion outside. Through the window, they could see Hammond approaching with two large men who looked like hired muscle. Looks like our friend is getting impatient, Sheriff Johnson observed, checking his gun. Mr. and Mrs. Cartwright, I suggest you let me handle this. Hammond entered the sheriff's office with his usual confident smile, but Lucy could see anger in his eyes. Sheriff Johnson, I trust you've explained to these good people that they're harboring a fugitive from justice? Well now, Mr. Hammond, that's interesting, the sheriff said casually. Because I've got a telegram here from a federal marshal who seems to think you might be the fugitive. Hammond's face went pale, but he recovered quickly. I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding? Oh, I'm sure there has been, the sheriff agreed. The misunderstanding is that you thought you could come into my town and threaten good people without anyone checking into your background. Ben stepped forward, holding the contract papers. Hammond, we've been going through my wife's father's contracts with you. Seems like you failed to deliver on most of your promises while taking his money and land. Business ventures sometimes fail, Hammond said smoothly. That's the risk everyone takes. But fraud is a crime, Lucy said, finding her courage. And according to this letter, you've been running the same scheme on families across 3 states. Hammond's. 2 hired men moved slightly as if preparing for trouble, but Sheriff Johnson's hand rested casually on his gun. "Mr. Hammond," the sheriff said pleasantly, "I think you should come with me. Seems there are some federal marshals who'd like to have a conversation with you." "This is outrageous," Hammond blustered. "I'm a respected businessman. You can't just arrest me based on wild accusations from some rancher's daughter." "Actually, I can," the sheriff said, producing handcuffs. "Federal warrant came through on the telegraph an hour ago. You're wanted for fraud, theft, and conspiracy across state lines." As Hammond was led away in handcuffs, his parting words were venomous. "This isn't over, Lucy. Even if they can't make these charges stick, I'll find another way to collect what you owe me." But his threats rang hollow now that his true nature was exposed. Later that day, the federal marshal arrived from Denver, a tall, serious man named Marshal Crawford who seemed very interested in the evidence Ben and Lucy had gathered. "You folks may have helped us close a case we've been working on for 2 years, he told them. "Hammond's been running this marriage scam all over the Western Territories. He finds families with unmarried daughters and valuable property, then manipulates them into engagement contracts that are designed to transfer wealth to him." "What happens now?" Lucy asked. "Now we build a case against him that will put him in federal prison for a very long time. And as for the contracts he's claiming, give him rights to you or your property, they're fraudulent documents that have no legal standing." Ben put his arm around Lucy's shoulders. "So Lucy is free?" "Really free? Free as a bird," Marshal Crawford confirmed. "Though I'd recommend you folks be careful for a while. Hammond has associates who might not be happy about his arrest." As they rode back to the ranch that evening, Lucy felt lighter than she had in years. The shadow that had been hanging over her since her father's death was finally lifted. "I can't believe it's really over," she said to Ben as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "It's over," Ben assured her, taking her hand. "Hammond can't hurt you anymore, can't hurt us anymore." Lucy looked at her husband, her real husband, freely chosen, and felt her heart overflow with gratitude and love. "Ben, when I married you, I thought I was just trying to survive. I never imagined I could be this happy." Ben brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "When I asked you to marry me, I thought I just needed a partner for the ranch. I never imagined I'd find the other half of my soul." As the stars came out over the ranch they had saved together, Ben and Lucy began making plans for a future that was finally, truly their own. 6 months later, the Sunset Valley Ranch was thriving like never before. The spring roundup had gone better than anyone had expected, and the cattle were healthy and strong. Lucy's business improvements had not only saved the ranch from financial ruin, but had made it one of the most profitable operations in the territory. But the real transformation was in Ben and Lucy themselves. What had begun as a marriage of convenience had blossomed into a love story that had the whole town talking. They worked together like they had been partners for years, but they also laughed together, dreamed together, and supported each other through every challenge. On a warm morning in May, Lucy stood in the kitchen making breakfast when she felt Ben's arms slip around her waist from behind. He nuzzled her neck gently, making her smile. "Good morning, Mrs. Cartwright," he murmured against her ear. "Good morning, Mr. Cartwright," she replied, leaning back against his chest. "Sleep well?" "Better than I have in years," Ben said honestly. It was true. Since Lucy had moved from the guest room into his room 3 months ago, he had slept more peacefully than he had since Daniel's death. Their relationship had deepened gradually and naturally. The business partnership had evolved into friendship, then into love, and finally into a marriage that was real in every sense of the word. They had courted each other while living in the same house, taking time to truly know each other before taking the final step of becoming husband and wife in more than just name. "Ben," Lucy said, turning in his arms, "I have something to tell you." Something in her voice made him look at her more carefully. "What is it?" Lucy smiled, her eyes sparkling with joy and nervousness. "I went to see Dr. Matthews in town yesterday." Ben's heart skipped a beat as he realized what she might be saying. "Lucy, we're going to have a baby," she said softly. For a moment, Ben couldn't speak. Then he let out a whoop of joy that could probably be heard all the way to the bunkhouse. He picked Lucy up and spun her around, both of them laughing. "Really? A baby?" he asked when he finally set her down. "Really, Dr. Matthews says everything looks good and the baby should arrive sometime in late fall." Ben cupped her face in his hands, his eyes shining with happiness. "I love you, Lucy Cartwright. I love you so much it sometimes scares me." "I love you too," Lucy whispered. "More than I ever thought possible." Later that morning, they shared the news with the ranch hands, who whooped and cheered like they were all family. Old Pete actually wiped tears from his eyes. "About time this place had some children running around," he said gruffly. "Ranch needs young voices to keep it alive." That afternoon, Ben and Lucy rode out to their favorite spot on the ranch, a hill overlooking the valley where they could see the entire spread laid out below them. They often came here to talk about their plans for the future. "Can you believe how much has changed since that first day when you asked me for a job?" Ben said, settling beside Lucy on the grass. Lucy laughed. "I can't believe you actually asked me to marry you." "What were you thinking?" "I was thinking that I was desperate, and you were the answer to a prayer I hadn't even known I was praying." Ben said seriously, "Best decision I ever made." "Even though I brought Hammond and all that trouble into your life?" "Especially because of that," Ben said firmly. "Lucy, dealing with Hammond together showed me what we could accomplish as a team. It proved that we could face anything as long as we faced it together." Lucy leaned against her husband's shoulder, feeling completely content. "What do you think our child will be like? Strong like their mother, stubborn like their father, and hopefully smart enough to appreciate what they have here," Ben said, his hand resting gently on Lucy's still flat stomach. "I hope they love the ranch the way we do," Lucy said. "I hope they understand that this place is more than just land and cattle, it's home." As if summoned by their conversation, a rider appeared on the horizon, heading toward the main house. Even from a distance, they could see it was the male rider from town. "I wonder what news he's bringing today," Ben mused. When they returned to the house, they found a letter waiting for them from Marshal Crawford. Hammond's trial had concluded, and he had been sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Moreover, the marshal had recovered nearly $30,000 in assets that Hammond had stolen from various victims, including Lucy's father. "It says here that as your father's heir, you're entitled to a significant portion of the recovered money," Ben read aloud. Lucy stared at the letter in amazement. "I never expected to see any of that money again." "What do you want to do with it?" Ben asked. Lucy thought for a moment, then smiled. "I want to expand the ranch. Build that new barn. We'd been talking about maybe buy some more land. And I want to set aside money for our children's education." "Our children, plural?" Ben raised an eyebrow. "Well, this baby will need brothers and sisters," Lucy said with a grin. That evening, the whole ranch family gathered for dinner to celebrate. The good news? The table was crowded with Ben, Lucy, Pete, Tommy, Carlos, Jim, and Bill, along with Reverend Williams and his wife Martha, who had become close friends. "I'd like to propose a toast," Ben said, raising his glass of cider. "To new beginnings, second chances, and the family we've all built together here at Sunset Valley Ranch." "And to love that grows in unexpected places," Lucy added, looking around the table at all the faces that had become dear to her. "To love," everyone echoed, raising their glasses. Later, as Ben and Lucy sat on their porch watching the stars come out, Lucy reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. A year ago she had been alone, desperate, and afraid. Now she was surrounded by love, carrying Ben's child, and looking forward to a future full of possibilities. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't been brave enough to ask you for a job that day?" Lucy asked. Ben considered the question seriously. "I think we would have found each other somehow. Some things are just meant to be." "You really believe that?" "I believe that love has a way of finding us when we need it most," Ben said, pulling her closer. "And I believe that sometimes the best things in life come from taking crazy risks with people who are brave enough to take crazy risks with us." Lucy smiled, thinking about that first day when Ben had made his outrageous proposal. She had thought she was accepting a marriage of convenience to solve her immediate problems. Instead, she had found her soulmate, her true home, and a love that would last a lifetime. As they sat together under the vast western sky, planning for their baby and dreaming about the future, both Ben and Lucy knew that their love story was just beginning. They had built something beautiful together, not just a successful ranch, but a real home filled with love, laughter, and hope for tomorrow. And when their first child was born the following autumn, a daughter with her mother's green eyes and her father's determined chin, she arrived into a world where love had triumphed over fear, where trust had overcome deception, and where two people who had started as strangers had become the greatest love Cedar Creek had ever seen. The Sunset Valley Ranch would flourish for generations to come, but its greatest success would always be the love that Ben and Lucy Cartwright built together, one day at a time, from the moment she asked for a job, and he asked her to marry him by sunset.